Pruning 101. We're talking shade trees, ornamental trees, not fruit trees, a little bit different techniques using the correct tools. So if you stop and you think, I'm going to use my finger and my thumb. So at the top, hand pruners are good for something like my pinky, up to that size. Loppers are good up to about the size of your thumb, and even a little bit larger than that, a pruning saw. And you notice one thing on all of those, they have that curved action to them, kind of holds the saw in place, or kind of holds that bottom jaw of the hand pruner or the loppers in place. But you want a scissor action. If you've got anvil type pruners, which I don't think you should have because it kind of matches the tissue and you don't want that. And definitely no chainsaws. I don't even recommend using the ones that are now the small ones that are on pole pruners that you get up. We got some of our landowners that like to prune high. You just don't control it and you really don't need it. Most of it you can work from the ground. As far as timing goes, you mentioned that the best time, January, February. So, you don't want to be out there in the rain, of course. Then the worst time, though, is when things start waking up, April, May. Now, this is from the Department of Conservation, April, May, and I'll even put June in there for things because what you're doing is when you prune, you're creating a wound. Now the tree's got to decide, am I going to spend energy healing myself or am I going to put it on the leaves and photosynthesis? So allocation of resources. I've also got red dots in June, July, and August. And this is in particular for red oaks. So black oaks, pin oaks, northern reds, scarlets, shumard, because we have oak wilt. For the most part, I've even seen if we happen to have a wet late summer, the conditions can be right for the spread of oak wilt, the beetle activity. So where you'll get the infection late in the season and it'll show up first thing when the spring hits. Light pruning, though, can be done about any time. And by light pruning, we'll talk, that's about 10% of the pruning that you'll be doing. But really, December, January, February, that is the best time to be pruning. Now, removing whole limbs or branches. So yes, we want to do a couple of things. I'm going to work from the tip out. So we cut side branches. You want to cut at the base of that branch. And in the case, if you do have something, a branch that maybe be hanging down a little bit, you'll want to cut above the bud. In other words, you want to have a bud right there that the branch will then tend to go up. But you don't want to have one that's turning down, and you'll have to create another issue. But always cutting at the base, cutting at the main trunk. We'll talk about the branch collar here in a second. But we don't want to do where you're cutting mid-twig, mid-branch, or leaving a stub, because that's what you're going to get these water sprouts, these water shoots. We'll see that when we talk topping. Use the 3-cut method, even if it's the size of your thumb. You don't want to go straight down because even in this winter weather, you'll get a tear and you're going to have a much larger wound, particularly then as the weight of the branch pulls that bark away. You'll want to do first, go out a couple inches, do an undercut about, a third to halfway. Then you do your second cut, you're going to cut from the top. And then if you do get that break, it's going to hit that undercut and it will stop. And then the third one is doing the finish cut close, but not into the branch collar. And like we say, we want to save that branch collar. That's that donut ring that's outside, that swelling. And so that's protective chemicals that are inside the tree, much like when a leaf gets ready to fall from the tree, this abscission zone. And so that puts a nice natural barrier. But you'll want to stay outside that donut. Too close, you'll get that flush cut, removes that collar. Too far out, and then if you do have some kind of disease issues going on, then you can kind of get a running start and actually have enough energy, if you will, to make it through that barrier. So really is that put it right there just outside that donut. And you'll notice you've done it right is if you get the scarring tissue, the callus tissue, the healing tissue, it'll be a nice ring all the way around. If it looks more like a horse collar, now you've cut into the branch collar. And don't over prune. This is topping. We don't want to cut all the branches off. You'll get those water sprouts again, like we say, epicormic branching, and that just sets yourself up for insects and disease issues, and particularly rot. You'll want to remove no more than 25% of the crown annually, and you'll want to plan pruning in advance. You don't want to be out there and, you can look at the architecture of the tree and kind of get an idea what you'll be taking off. But you'll definitely, so this might be in a young tree, you might be doing it annually until you kind of get things to where you want them. Some things like removing the double leader to prevent a forked trunk. That's really one in a young tree. If you don't do that, you're going to have a problem later on. Pruning out acute angle crotches to prevent future structural problems like here. And then, of course, removing that lower limb as needed. I usually start and say, how tall am I? I want to have maybe 8 feet to the first limb. And then I'll kind of plan my architecture, what branches I'm going to be pruning above that. And like I say, all of these images were taken graciously from the Department of Conservation's pub that I believe they're going to post out as well. And that is it.